Okay, I need you to be honest with me for a second. When you've been in this fandom long enough, you start to notice patterns, not trends, not hype, patterns. And when this result came out, most fans didn't scream, they didn't act shocked, they didn't even argue, they just said, yeah, that makes sense. Because somehow, even before the numbers were released, people already knew how this was going to end. And that's the part that's interesting. This wasn't a sudden spike. It wasn't a viral week. It wasn't one dramatic moment pushing everything up. It was consistency. And if you've been paying attention to Taehyung and Jungkook's impact over the years, you probably saw this coming too. So I want to ask you right now, before we even get into the details, did you expect this result or did it surprise you? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many of you already knew this was inevitable. Because once you see what list they topped again and how it compares to everyone else, it becomes very clear that this isn't just popularity, it's dominance. And the way it happened says a lot more than people think. Before we reveal anything, let me say something quickly. If you're new here, this channel isn't about forcing narratives or exaggerating every small interaction. It's about watching patterns, long-term trends, the kind of things you only notice if you've been paying attention for years. And today's result? It's not random. If you enjoy these kinds of breakdowns, where we look at data, fandom behavior, and why certain ships keep rising no matter what trends, make sure you subscribe. Because we don't just react here, we analyze. And trust me, this one is interesting because what Taehyung and Jungkook just achieved again isn't something that happens by accident. It's not about one viral edit or one trending clip. It's about something much bigger. So let's finally talk about the list they just topped and why fans were already expecting it before the results even dropped. So here's what happened. Taehyung and Jungkook topped the list again, ranking as the most voted K-pop ship in a global fan poll for 2025. And before anyone jumps to conclusions, let's clarify something. This wasn't a tiny niche vote. This wasn't a random Twitter thread. This was a large-scale international poll where fans across different countries participated, and the result? Taekook again. Now, what makes this interesting isn't just the fact that they ranked first, it's the fact that they've been ranking at or near the top consistently for years. This isn't a one-time win. It's not a surprise spike. It's not a sudden trend caused by one viral moment. It's stability. And that's actually much harder to achieve because in fandom culture, trends change constantly. One week, a ship goes viral. The next week, a different interaction takes over. Attention shifts fast. Narratives rise and fall quickly. But Taekook doesn't rise and fall. It stays. That's what makes this result powerful. When the numbers came out, the reaction wasn't chaotic. It wasn't explosive. It was almost calm. Fans weren't shocked. They were expectant. You could literally see comments saying things like, of course. Who else? We already knew. And that kind of confidence doesn't come from hype. It comes from long-term presence. Let me ask you something here, and be honest. Do you think Taekook's dominance comes from current moments or from years of built-up connection and fandom investment? Because that's the real conversation. This result isn't about proving a relationship, it's about proving impact. It shows that no matter what trends, no matter what debates happen, no matter which ship gets loud for a week or two, Taekook's base remains incredibly solid. And that consistency is what separates a trending topic from a dominant ship. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When you compare the numbers to other ships, even very popular ones, you start to notice a pattern. Some ships spike high for short periods. Others fluctuate depending on recent content. Taekook doesn't fluctuate much, it maintains. And in fandom culture, maintaining the top spot over time is actually much harder than getting there once. If you're still watching at this point, I want to know. Are you surprised they topped the list again? Or did you already expect this result before you even saw it? Drop it in the comments. Because the next part is where we talk about why this consistency sometimes frustrates other parts of the fandom and why this result sparked quiet debates again. Now, here's where we need to go a little deeper, because some people will immediately say, it's just a popularity poll. But if you've been around fandom spaces long enough, you know it's not that simple. Popularity is loud, dominance is steady. Popularity spikes when something dramatic happens, a viral clip, a controversial moment, a trending edit that explodes for 48 hours. That's popularity. But what Taekook shows isn't just that, it's endurance. And endurance in fandom culture is actually rare. Think about how fast attention shifts. One week, a different ship trends. The next week, there's a new narrative, then a new rumor, then a new viral interaction. Most ships depend heavily on momentum. When content drops, engagement spikes. When things go quiet, numbers drop. But Taekook's numbers don't collapse during quiet periods. That's the difference. This result didn't come after some huge dramatic moment. There wasn't a massive event pushing engagement right before the poll. No sudden scandal, no forced interaction, no headline-grabbing situation. It happened during relative calm. And that's what makes it impressive. Because if a ship can maintain top ranking during calm periods, that means the support isn't reaction-based. It's rooted. It's built on years of shared history, inside jokes, archived moments, fan creations, edits, fan fiction, analysis threads, a whole ecosystem that keeps feeding itself regardless of what's trending that week. And that's something a temporary spike can't replicate. Let me ask you this. Do you think ships that last this long survive because of moments or because of community? Because at this point, Taekook isn't just a ship. It's a fandom subculture inside a larger fandom. And that's why topping the list again matters more than people think. It's not about winning a vote. It's about proving that even after years, and even with competing narratives, the base hasn't weakened. Now, of course, that kind of consistency doesn't come without reactions, because whenever one ship dominates for too long, conversations start shifting. And that's where things get interesting, because not everyone reacts to this kind of result the same way. Now, here's the part that doesn't get talked about openly. Whenever one ship keeps topping lists consistently, especially over years, something subtle starts happening in the background. Not loud drama, not open fights, but tension. Because in fandom spaces, visibility equals power. And when one pairing consistently dominates rankings, trends, edits, and engagement, it naturally shifts attention away from others. And that doesn't always sit comfortably with everyone. After the results dropped, the reactions weren't explosive, but they were noticeable. You could see different types of comments. Some fans celebrated, some shrugged and said, "Of course," and some questioned the validity of the poll. That's normal. Anytime numbers are involved, there will be skepticism. People say things like, "It's just one website. It's biased. It doesn't represent everyone." And that's fair to an extent, but here's the thing. Even if you remove this specific poll from the equation, Taekook consistently appears near the top in multiple spaces. Fanfiction rankings, social media engagement, edits, fan votes. It's not one isolated result. It's repetition, and repetition builds narrative. That's why this result didn't feel shocking. It felt like confirmation of something that's been quietly visible for a long time. But it also highlights something else, something bigger. It shows how strong a ship's internal community is. Because polls don't win themselves. Engagement doesn't maintain itself. That requires participation, organization, a fan base that stays active even when there's no dramatic push. Let me ask you this. Why do you think Taekook's base stays this consistent over time? Is it nostalgia? Is it emotional attachment? Is it the dynamic itself? Or is it simply momentum that never faded? This is where the conversation gets interesting, because whether someone supports the ship or not, the consistency is undeniable. And in fandom culture, consistency over years is actually rare. Trends rotate, narratives change, but some ships stay. And when they stay at the top repeatedly, that tells you something about how deeply embedded they are in fandom identity. Now here's where we zoom out a little. Because this result isn't just about winning a ranking. It reflects something about how Taekook exists in the larger BTS fandom structure, and why it hasn't faded, even during quieter periods. And that's what we need to unpack next. Here's the real question. Why hasn't Taekook faded? Because if we're being honest, most ships do. They rise during a certain era, they trend when there's content, they dominate during a comeback cycle, and then they slowly lose visibility. But Taekook never fully disappears, even during quiet periods, even during solo eras, even when there's no obvious interaction feeding the narrative. That's not accidental, that's structural. Taekook isn't just supported by recent moments, it's supported by an archive. Years of shared content, interviews, inside jokes, performances, behind-the-scenes clips, emotional moments that fans revisit constantly. There's a built-in memory bank, and that memory keeps regenerating engagement. When new fans enter the fandom, they don't start from zero. They inherit years of compiled edits, analysis threads, viral compilations, fan fiction timelines. The ship doesn't need fresh fuel every week because it already has a foundation. That's power, and that's rare, because many ships depend heavily on current visibility. If interactions slow down, engagement drops. But Taekook's ecosystem sustains itself. It's almost self-renewing. That's why topping the list again doesn't feel like a comeback. It feels like maintenance. Let me ask you something honestly. Do you think Taekook's strength comes more from history or from the present? Because what we're seeing right now isn't a hype cycle. It's the result of long-term embedding inside fandom culture. And once something becomes culturally embedded, it's much harder to displace. Which brings us to something even more interesting. Because if a ship holds this kind of structural power, it changes how other ships are perceived around it. And that dynamic is what we need to look at next. Now let's talk about something that people don't always say out loud. When one ship consistently dominates rankings like this, it naturally changes the landscape for the others. Not because it erases them, not because it invalidates them, but because attention in fandom spaces is limited. There's only so much engagement to go around. When Taekook tops lists repeatedly, it reinforces a perception, whether people agree with it or not, that this ship holds the strongest long-term influence inside the fandom. And perception matters, because perception shapes narratives. Other ships might trend during specific moments. They might go viral after certain interactions. They might spike during certain eras. But dominance over time creates hierarchy. And once a hierarchy forms in fandom culture, it's very difficult to shift. That's why these poll results don't just feel like numbers. They feel symbolic. They reinforce the idea that Taekook isn't just one of many ships. It's the reference point, the comparison baseline, the one people measure others against, and that can create tension. Some fans see it as validation, others see it as imbalance, some see it as harmless fun, others see it as competitive. But whether someone supports Taekook or not, it's hard to deny the consistency. And here's something interesting. When a ship becomes structurally dominant, it actually faces more scrutiny, more debates, more pushback, because visibility attracts attention, and attention invites challenge. Let me ask you this. Do you think fandom spaces are healthier when multiple ships rotate at the top, or when one stays dominant for years? Because this isn't just about Taekook, it's about how fandom ecosystems function. Some ships are waves, others are foundations. And right now, the numbers suggest Taekook is functioning more like a foundation than a wave, which leads to the final and most important question. What does this actually mean moving forward? So when you step back and look at everything, the years of consistency, the steady engagement, the way Taekook doesn't spike and fall but simply remains, this result starts to feel less like a victory and more like confirmation. Not confirmation of a relationship, confirmation of impact, because topping a list once can be hype. Topping it again and again becomes identity. And that's what we're seeing here. Taekook isn't surviving off one era. It isn't trending because of one viral moment. It isn't being pushed by one temporary wave. It's embedded. And whether someone supports the ship or not, that level of stability inside a constantly shifting fandom space is impressive. Now here's the real question, and I want you to think about this before you comment. Do you think Taekook will still be #1 in the next ranking? Or do you think fandom dynamics will eventually shift? Because nothing in fandom culture stays untouched forever. Trends evolve, generations change, narratives shift, but some foundations are harder to shake. Drop your honest opinion below, not just yes or no, but why. I want to see real takes in the comments, and if you enjoy tracking these shifts, not just reacting emotionally, but actually analyzing what the numbers and patterns are telling us, make sure you subscribe. Because this wasn't just about one poll, it was about power, longevity, and what it really means to dominate quietly. And trust me, if the next data drop looks anything like this one, the conversation is only going to get bigger. I'll see you in the next video.